Hey guys, Mr. Mini Painter here and welcome to my channel. Today I'm going to show you how I painted Green Arrow from the game Batman Gotham City Chronicles. This beautiful vigilante with his iconic bow was a lot of fun to paint, and even though it's just a few colors, red and green mostly, it's still interesting to paint and he has this nice base that he's standing on. So let's get to painting. So to start off with, I primed the model in a black primer. He's got this beautiful display standing on a rooftop. And I'm going to start by painting some skin colors by using Night Quest or Flesh as a base color. There is quite some skin showing on part of his arms, of course part of the face. And make sure that you get a nice solid color. Now by using Kislev Flesh, I'm highlighting the skin. And this might seem quite bright, but what I'm doing here is focusing on the raised areas, so the fingers, the elbows, the tip of the nose, stuff like that, and create a solid line, then water down my paint and kind of blend from the dark towards the bright. When you're doing this, it's always important to keep in mind that you're pulling your paint with the tip of your brush towards the brightest part, so you get a nice transition, and you want the bright part to be the brightest, of course. Next step is I'm using Palette Witch Flesh to paint in the eyes. This is always tricky and always wise to do as soon as possible, so you can make corrections if needed. I'm then taking some XV88, and with this I'm painting the base color of the hair and beard. Next I'm highlighting that with some Zemezi Desert, covering about most of it, but leave some of that dark shining through. This is not really easy to reach because of the arrow that is in front of his face, so you have to improvise a little bit to get to that beard. Once dry, I'm washing it with some Seraphim Sepia, just to create an extra tone and add some extra darkness in between those strands of hair. Once this is done, I'm creating an extreme highlight with Dorn Yellow, going for that real blonde look. Next thing we're going to do is cover some base colors and start off with the green, because of course we are dealing with a green arrow here, so yeah, that was to be expected. So it's the hood, the legs, part of his upper body. Let me show you the end result of all the green I painted here. So that's part of the body armor he's wearing, the shoulders, the protection around his wrists, and the bow itself. Next is the base color of reds, and to start off with we're using corn red here to paint the padding on his knees and lower legs. As well as the protection on his lower arms. and also his body armor. The inner part. The quiver we're painting with Rhinox hide. Now it's time for some washes. All the green I washed with Athonian Camo Shade. That way you get some extra darkness in there and the tone of green changes a little bit. Second wash we're going to use is Carabao Crimson for all the reds. Adding some dark shades in between those deeper recesses and a more rich red color. Then the upper part of his legs shows some pants, and I'm painting some details on that with Dark Reaper, just to create a different color on the top of the legs instead of the lower parts that are more shaded. So it's more of an edge highlight here and there, also on the body armor that is still black, on his front and back. And I'm using the same technique as when I am painting the skin tone, for example. So make sure to draw a line where you want it to be the brightest. Next, thin down your paint and kind of blend those colors together by washing the dark to the bright parts. Now it's time to highlight the green, and to do so I'm mixing some Walk Flesh and Nurgling Green. I'm focusing on all the tiny details on the legs, on the knees, all the parts that will reflect the most light, the feet, basically all the green we painted before, but keep in mind that you choose your light source. So determine where your light is coming from and make that part, of course, the brightest, and leaving the exact opposite part darker than the rest. When painting miniatures, normally it's very common, of course, to choose the front of your model to be the brightest part, because that is where the focus is going to, but you can choose your own. In the next step, I'm increasing the Nurgling Green in the mix, so keep adding that and repeating the same process, focusing on smaller areas, so to get a nice transition in dark to bright green. And then as a final extreme highlight, I'm using pure Nurgling Green to just emphasize those very edges and sharp parts to really finish it off. Now it's time to go back to the reds, and we're going to do the same process. First we're taking Wasdaka Red as the first highlight color. Make sure to leave those dark areas dark and focus on those parts that would be the most bright, that would reflect the most light, so the top parts, for example, of his armor in this case. We're repeating this process by using Evil Sun Scarlet as an extreme highlight, focusing on smaller areas and adding some extra brightness towards the red. Now Green Arrow has a lot of arrows and not many of them are green, so I decided to paint this one as a steel arrow with ashen gray. Now there are a lot of arrows in his quiver, and those I later on decided to give another color for the shaft of the arrow, but you can choose whatever you want, of course. I like the steel arrow as a nice extra color to this mini. I painted all the feathery parts, the flights, with the same color. And I highlighted everything, the arrow and the point of the arrow and the back sides of the arrows in the quiver with administratum gray. That way you get some extra sharpness in there. Focus on the arrow in hand, only on the top part of it. Now I'm washing the brown parts with Agrex Earthshade. So that will be the quiver and the strap around his waist. I decided to give the arrows in the quiver a brown look, so I'm using Mournfang Brown to do so. Try and keep some of that black in between, so you get a nice illusion of individual arrows here. Now it's time to paint the base, and I'm using Scrag Brown to paint the piece of building that he is standing on, and some Mechanicus Standard Grey for the base itself. Now to create a stone effect for the part that he is standing on, we're going to mix some colors together, because stone, like masonry, is never really one color. It's a mixture of colors. So first I'm adding some Bugman's Glow. I'm using a dry brush and kind of stippling it on, leaving some of the Scrag Brown shining through, so you get a mixture of brown and pinkish tones. I'm repeating this process by using Cadian Flesh Tone. Again, stippling it on. You don't have to cover the exact same layer, it's nice to have some difference in colors here and there. And in the end result it really works, trust me. Now for the base, the grey part, I'm using some Monolith to shade it and to pick out some of those details. They are very tiny, but there's some cracks in the base that you can make visible by using this technique. And I'm also adding some extra color, and since he is Green Arrow, I'm using Biltang Green to add some green to the base as well. I'm adding some extra detail with Agrex Earthshade and also covering the stone part, the masonry, with this Agrex Earthshade as well. And that also kind of blends the previous colors together. Now it's time for some final details. I'm using Gorthor Brown on the quiver and on the strap around his waist. Give it a nice edge highlight. And finally, I'm using a dry brush and some gray cere for the gray part of the base. I'm kind of stippling on some effect here and there and using a dry brush technique as well to kind of blend this all together and really make those details pop out. You can add a tiny bit of gray to the masonry as well, to make sure that they have some extra detail. Give it some sharpness around the edges, for example. And here's our final result for Green Arrow. Look at that vigilante. Looking all green and arrowy, and a tiny bit of red, of course. This was a lot of fun to paint, and I hope this video was of any help to you guys. And if it is, please like this video and leave a comment below. I'd love to hear from you. And also consider subscribing to the channel, if it either is the YouTube channel or my Patreon page. For now, thank you so much for watching, and I hope to see you in one of my next videos. Bye bye!